There's a persistent belief, almost intuitive in nature, that if you want to hurt a narcissist, you must confront them, expose them, or make them feel the same emotional pain they caused you. Many people carry this assumption into the aftermath of the relationship. If they hurt me, I need to show them I'm stronger. I need to prove that I've moved on. I want them to feel what I felt. At first glance, this seems logical. It aligns with a basic human desire for justice, for emotional symmetry, for things to feel balanced. But this assumption is fundamentally flawed, because what hurts a narcissist the most is not what most people think. And more importantly, many of the reactions that feel like they should hurt them actually reinforce the very dynamic that gave them power in the first place. To understand this clearly, we need to shift away from surface level interpretations of narcissistic behavior and move into the underlying psychological structure that drives it. At the core of narcissistic functioning is a fragile and unstable self concept. Clinically, this is often described as a fragmented self structure, a sense of identity that lacks cohesion and relies heavily on external validation to maintain stability. Unlike a securely developed sense of self, which is internally regulated, the narcissistic self depends on constant feedback from the external environment. This is where the concept of narcissistic supply becomes central. Narcissistic supply refers to any form of attention, recognition, emotional reaction, or validation that reinforces the narcissist's sense of importance and control. It does not have to be positive. This point is critical. Admiration works. Fear works. Anger works. Even hatred works. As long as there is emotional engagement, there is supply. This is why attempts to hurt a narcissist through confrontation, emotional expression, or retaliation often fail. Not only do they fail, they frequently produce the opposite effect. They confirm relevance. They signal that the narcissist still occupies space in your emotional world. And from a psychological standpoint, that is not a loss of control. It is evidence that control is still intact. To illustrate this, consider the analogy of a stage performer. A narcissist, in many ways, operates like someone on a stage. Their identity is constructed through performance, and the audience's reaction, whether applause or outrage, serves as feedback that the performance matters. Now imagine an audience member stands up and begins shouting at the performer. From the audience member's perspective, this is an act of resistance. But from the performer's perspective, it is still engagement. The spotlight remains. The performance continues. What the performer cannot tolerate is something far more threatening. An empty room, no reaction, no attention, no acknowledgement of their presence. This is where we begin to approach what actually hurts a narcissist the most. It is not your anger. It is not your confrontation. It is not even your rejection in the way most people understand it. It is irrelevance. More specifically, it is the complete withdrawal of psychological significance. This is often misunderstood as simply ignoring them, but the distinction here is important. Surface-level ignoring, while still thinking about them, checking their activity, or hoping they notice your absence, is not true irrelevance. It is behavioral distance paired with psychological attachment. And narcissists are highly attuned to this difference. What disrupts them at a deeper level is not the absence of contact, but the absence of impact. When they can no longer influence how you think, feel, or behave, even indirectly, their access to narcissistic supply from you is effectively severed. This creates what can be described as a narcissistic injury. A narcissistic injury occurs when the narcissist's self-image is challenged or destabilized. However, not all injuries are equal. Confrontation may trigger defensiveness, denial, or counterattack, but it still provides engagement. Irrelevance, on the other hand, offers nothing to respond to. There is no argument to win, no emotion to manipulate, no narrative to control. It is a psychological void. And for someone whose identity depends on external reflection, a void is profoundly destabilizing. To understand why, we need to look at the mechanism of object constancy. In healthy psychological development, object constancy refers to the ability to maintain a stable internal sense of others, even when they are not physically present or actively engaging. It allows individuals to feel secure in relationships without constant reassurance. In narcissistic structures, this capacity is often impaired. Relationships are not held as stable internal representations. Instead, they are experienced in terms of immediate relevance. Are you reflecting me positively right now or not? When you become irrelevant, when you are no longer reflecting anything back, the narcissist does not simply move on in a healthy sense. They experience a disruption in their internal regulation. It is not that they miss you in the way a securely attached individual might miss someone. They experience the loss of what you provided: regulation, validation, reflection, control. This is why, in many cases, when a narcissist senses true irrelevance, not performative distance, but genuine detachment, they may attempt to re enter your life. Not always overtly, sometimes subtly. A message, a reaction, a sudden reappearance. This is not necessarily about reconciliation. It is about re-establishing relevance, testing whether the connection and therefore the supply is still accessible. This brings us to a crucial clarification. What hurts a narcissist the most is not something you do to them. It is something you stop providing. And that shift from action to withdrawal is where many people struggle. Because withdrawal in this context is not passive. It requires restructuring your internal world. It requires disengaging not just behaviorally, but cognitively and emotionally. It means not performing your healing for them, not measuring your progress against their perception, not using your growth as a message directed at them. It means that at some point, they are no longer the reference point in your decisions. And this is where the dynamic fundamentally changes. Because as long as your actions are in any way organized around them, whether through anger, validation, or even the desire to prove something, they remain psychologically central. Irrelevance removes that center. And without that center, the narcissist loses more than attention. They lose position. This is not an immediate or dramatic process. It is often quiet, almost unnoticeable from the outside. But internally, it is a significant reorganization. The energy that was once directed outward, toward understanding them, anticipating them, reacting to them, begins to return to you. And as that shift stabilizes, something else becomes clear. The goal is not to hurt the narcissist. The goal is to no longer be part of the system that requires hurting at all. Because in a dynamic built on control, reaction, and emotional dependency, the most disruptive act is not resistance within the system. It is exit from it. And that exit does not happen through force. It happens through detachment so complete that your life no longer orbits around their existence, even in thought. That is what they cannot access. That is what they cannot manipulate. And that is what, at the deepest structural level, destabilizes the narcissistic dynamic more than anything else.